is still in conference. I think we've got, as of now, we've got everything signed, but was wanting to see about your interest of inserting the Astra plan language out of 21-25. And we can have staff kind of go over, because we had changed some of the formula pieces. What was in that conference committee report that we had not adopted or voted on yet, but we had kind of come to some agreement before we decided to split some things out. But I guess the House was interested in proposing that language, and in order to appease some of the conversations that we've had, didn't know if the Senate would be interested in going back to either the protest petition provisions or something that we have not discussed yet. I was just trying to think outside the box if we could require get rid of the election and the protest petition discussion and just require like a supermajority vote of the governing board that's adopting the budget, whether it be a 2/3 or 3/4 or 4/5 or whatever. I've had some conversations with House members that really like giving the voters some type of say in the process and being able to come in and kind of have veto authority. That seems to be the word of the day, vetoes. So give the people the power to still veto. So I didn't know if you had any preference or any wanted to have any discussion on that. I think the House would really like to still use that protest petition language that we had developed, but I'd be happy to have a discussion or start that discussion and see where the Senate might be at on that.
So let us discuss it, Mr. Chairman. I know we like the idea of an election. I know there's pros and cons with the protest petition and the election. And so the third item that you had proposed, we hadn't talked about or thought about yet. So if you wouldn't mind letting us visit a little bit on this, I'm glad that, and I guess a lot of people don't know, even once we gavel out, we'll still be having these conversations on how to make the property tax system a better system, but we'll absolutely let us visit and see where we're at.
Okay.
Thank you. So, Mr. Chairman, thank you for your patience. We have more questions than answers at this point. So we do, if, could we get Eddie to kind of go over and refresh the provisions for what the House actually passed with the protest petition and then what we agreed on the election, just so that we know where we're at. And then we have some more questions based on what he tells us.
Certainly, yeah, and it's been a while since we've did that, and there was a lot of movement on that. So, yeah, I think a refresher would be wise.
Thank you.
So what the House passed as it related to protest petitions is that upon the adoption of a budget in excess of the funding limit, the taxing jurisdiction has to certify that to the county treasurer, I believe, and then the county treasurer posts the announcement on the appropriate county website or social media, if it exists, about the availability of the protest petitions. And qualified voters of the taxing jurisdiction have 30 days from that action in which to sign the protest petition. And if at least 10% of if qualified voters totaling at least 10% of the votes cast for the most recent general election for U.S. president, then the taxing entity is not allowed to exceed the limit as provided for it. If a number less than that signs onto the protest petition within that 30-day period, then the taxing entity is allowed to exceed it as adopted by their budget. And they're just required to, in essence, amend their budget back down to the property tax limit. Whatever limit you decide on, the limit in 35 was not identical to the limit that you had previously reached agreement upon in 21-25. And so if in the event of a successful protest petition, the taxing entity is just required to amend their budget back down to that limit in some form or fashion. It's up to them how to do so. And October 1st was the deadline that they had to, I believe, certify that newly revised budget to the county clerk.
And if I may, just a couple of clarifications. So the threshold is a limit on the property taxes, not on the actual budget spending.
Yeah, if the budget is spending money from some source other than property taxes, it's a limit on the adoption of the budget as it is financed by property taxes, the property tax financing of the budget.
Okay, and I want to be clear on this. Then they would just have to go down to the threshold if the petition was successful. They still could have an increase, but it's whatever the threshold is. Is that correct?
Yes, they could go up to the limit, but not exceed the limit in the event of a successful petition.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. So then for the conference committee report, we had discussed an election instead of a petition.
The conference committee report required any intent to exceed the amount to be required to be certified to the county clerk by June 1st. And if the taxing jurisdiction didn't meet that deadline, then the limit became kind of a hard cap, so to speak. And then there would be an election. You would work out kind of a calendar oriented around the August primary election. But in odd-numbered years, if there wasn't otherwise going to be an August primary election anywhere within the county, within the taxing jurisdiction, the county clerk had the option of making it either an August primary election or a mail ballot election on September 15th. Was kind of the version as it existed in the previous agreement on 21-25.
Okay, and thank you, Eddie. That's helpful. And then what the third option would be is a vote of the governing body. Is that what you're?
Yes, when the governing body went to adopt their budget, and it would be the full budget, it wouldn't be the revenue neutral hearing where they voted to exceed the revenue neutral. That would be the whole budget. We could require like a 4/5 majority or whatever super majority level we wanted to impose to adopt or to exceed that threshold.
Okay, thank you. And since we put in the other bill that the budgets would be due on October 1st, that budget vote would have to be on or before October 1st. Okay. And I just want to make sure that, so the logistics of the petition and the election go away if it is the governing body themselves deciding. So, Mr. Chairman, I think we're interested in taking a look at this. I think there might be some more questions. Did you have any? Okay, Mr. Chairman, so we would like to discuss the other provisions. I think the other thing would be the threshold. And I think that would be the only thing in this scenario then, would be the threshold and actually who votes. So, yeah, we're afraid the threshold's too high. Because what happened when we had the pass lid, I wish I could remember where she was from. She was from Western Kansas, and it was a county treasurer, nobody, any relation. And she said, we are forcing a tax increase every year. I said, what are you talking about? And she says, well, we have to collect right up to the lid every year so that we won't have to go to a vote of the people later on. And I thought that was interesting because that's how they saw it. They were collecting the money and putting it in their reserves so that they didn't have to go to a vote of the people. So I think whatever our threshold is, we need to be very cautious that it's not, obviously we want them to be able to work within it, but we want it to be low enough too that it is an incentive to not increase property taxes. So we'd like to discuss the threshold if you're okay with that.
Certainly, yes.
Any suggestions? I don't think you'll like where we come. We're looking at possibly a 3% threshold because of, 3%'s been bannered around in 1603, but the reason I'm thinking 3% is if we do the valuation limit, it seems like the House may be more amenable to 4% on it, and I just didn't want to confuse the numbers being 3% on the, one of them 3% and one of them 4%. I don't care which one's which, actually I do, but I would like you guys to help us get where we need to be on that.
Okay, and you're still proposing having a fixed percentage at like a 3% rather than looking at inflation and growth, if the factors there, similar to what we had in 21-25, where it's a fixed percent or less.
So what we would do is 3% or the House's equation, actually, whichever one's less. And the House equation, if I remember correctly, was it was Midwest CPI index plus bonding that had been voted on by the people plus new construction. So whichever one of those two would be the lower number, that would be the threshold.
Okay, that was my understanding as well.
Yeah, but I was just trying to get those numbers so that they're not the same. But if you guys think that's not a big enough deal it's not a hill to die on. If they end up being the same number, they end up being the same number. I was just trying to, I've called one the Astra value, and the other one is the taxable value, is what I've been referring them to. But so anyhow, any questions or thoughts? I mean, you guys will probably want to digest.
Yeah, let us chat it. We'll discuss that a little bit.
Okay. We do like the idea of the governing body for simplicity and where we're at in the process, and then we can take a look at this next year. We're thinking we do like 4/5. I think, I know somebody had suggested 100% at one point. I think that's a little aggressive. 4/5 kind of makes sense. If you have a body of 3, it's still 100%.
Right.
Right. But if you have a school board that's, 5 members, then 4 of the 5 members would have to vote for that increase. So, it's just something to negotiate.
Yeah, and that's the reason I proposed that too, is because with the language that we put in, kind of establishing that October 1st date, if we go back to a protest petition, there was a lot of moving parts in that too that were still based off of that August 25th date. So we would have to make some not significant adjustments, but we'd have to go back and kind of reevaluate that. So this was a proposal just to try to simplify things, but.
I think it's, you know, under the circumstances where we are now, I think it's a good idea.
Eddie, I had a quick question. Under 2125, was it 4% plus new construction? I was trying to remember the formula that we had.
It was 4% plus new construction or the Midwest CPI index plus, it was the house equation or the 4% plus new construction.
Okay, so was your offer or your proposal to do the 3% plus that, or just a flat 3%?
No, it was 3% or the house equation, which the house equation was the Midwest CPI index plus the bonding. So basically, we stripped the new construction out and lowered a percentage.
Yeah, we were debating that. We would be willing to take the 3% if we left that new construction provision in.
Let us think about that. You're saying 3% plus new construction
Yes.
or the house equation. We have to go vote final action
Okay.
on a CCR. Do you want to come back right after?
We can hang out if you think you'll be quick on
We're going to
that.
vote and come back.
Okay, yeah, we'll just stay here.
We'll be back in about 5 to 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Would you mind restating your proposal? We want to confirm that where we were at on it.
Certainly, we were wanting to go back to the original language out of 21-25 where it was 4% plus new growth, or the formula of inflation plus growth plus voter-approved bonds, and move that to a 3% plus growth for the formula of inflation plus growth plus bonds. Correct.
Thank you. That's what I thought you were. I need to make sure we're all on the same page. But so we definitely need to confirm that and then confirm. So the threshold, the number on the governing body, and Mr. Chairman, there was a piece in the legislation that allowed the counties to get a portion of the money no matter what. And since there's no taxpayer approval in there, can we revisit that amount that gets distributed to the counties no matter what? I'm not saying that we go away with it, but right, we were at 25%, and it may not be incentive enough to, I mean, we're trying to walk that fine line of the carrot and how good is the carrot. And if they get the money, so much money without staying below, then we lose our carrot, basically, or we decrease the.
Right, and I was visiting with staff on that because that was, you know, if it was subject to the public input, whether it be an election or a protest petition, that was kind of intended to maybe help the county pay for that election or the costs that were associated with the election. If we just move to the, you know, the vote of the board, you know, they can take a vote on it, and if it fails, they have to go back in. They can't really, they cannot adopt that budget until they either exceed it, or if it fails, they have to reduce their budget and pass their budget, at which point they would qualify because that is the budget that they pass. So it's almost kind of a self-governed mechanism. So I don't think that 25% would even be in play unless I'm understanding that incorrectly.
No, that's what we wanted to clarify. So I'm glad to know. We think to take it out of play would be the smart thing at this point. I can see in the future with the cost of the elections and stuff, maybe, but under this scenario, there's no really increased cost to them. They're just taking a vote.
Correct.
Another vote. They will, third time, guys, it'll be revenue neutral, your budget, and another property tax increase above a threshold. So, Astra.
Well, I think the intent is on the proposed budget that they have, the current vote that they have after they have their budget hearing. That's where this requirement on the 4/5, if we're going to go, I'll just use that number. If we change that, we can. But if we impose that on the adopting of the budget, that includes that tax increase plus the entire budget. So if that fails, they have to go back and reduce their budget until they get enough votes to either not exceed that threshold and just get a simple majority, which would be the same requirement, simple majority to exceed revenue neutral, or they do get that 4/5 requirement to exceed whatever that threshold would be.
Okay, let us visit a little bit about this, and I'm sure we'll have a few more questions. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's interesting. The dynamics and what's at play. We like your offer. I mean, of course, we'd rather have 3%, but we understand that we're negotiating and we would accept the 3% with the new construction or the house equation, whichever's lower. But our counter is that the Astra money is distributed only to municipalities and counties that stay revenue neutral. And that makes it a true carrot for them to stay revenue neutral. And we know over 62%, I think several counties, I can't even imagine how many stayed revenue neutral. But that is a true carrot for them to keep their property taxes at revenue neutral from the previous year. And I think the taxpayers would benefit if we were able to do that. So we still have the vote of the 3% and on that, but we're just trying to keep them, we want the carrot to be revenue neutral.
Madam Chair, thank you for the offer. We had some interesting discussion on that. we appreciate what you're trying to do and understand the incentive there to remain revenue neutral. We just had concerns that, and I know that was kind of some of the concerns originally in the Senate Tax Committee was, is that a big enough carrot to actually incentivize that behavior? Don't think we're going to be on board on that. We've got too much disagreement on where we would land on that. So
So, Mr. Chairman, do you have a counteroffer?
we didn't really come up with one at this time.
Okay, so it doesn't want to negotiate against itself, but since you're not accepting that offer, we did come up with a different idea. And what it would be is 100% distribution if they stay revenue neutral, and a 50% distribution if they stay under the threshold. And then nothing if they exceed the threshold.
Obviously.
Yeah, so ours is a little aggressive too, in the sense that if they attempt to exceed the threshold and fail, then they forfeited any of the Astra money.
No, say that again. If they attempt to,
So we're rewarding if they stay revenue neutral, and then we're rewarding if they stay under the threshold. But if they have to stay under the threshold because the vote failed, we don't want to reward that. So if they attempt to exceed the threshold, then they forfeit all of the Astra money for that year.
I'm just trying to figure out how we govern that. Are we going to attend all the meetings, and do we have to record that vote and then come back? And I'm just trying to figure out how we, if the state treasurer's office is distributing the Astra money, how do they verify whether or not the vote failed or if it didn't?
So, Mr. Chairman, that would be recorded in the minutes, and the minutes could be sent to the treasurer's office for verification.
Okay, let us consider that.
It is complicated, but we are trying to make this a true carrot to reward counties and municipalities that are trying to keep their property taxes down. I think, honestly, rural counties would probably benefit more from this than the urban, our good friends to the north of us or to the east of us. Yeah, they have a completely different scenario. I have a feeling that that Astra money may or may not be an enticement for them. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Madam Chair, I think we have a counteroffer. We're interested in the idea of if they're attempting to exceed it and it fails, there are repercussions. We don't want to get too much into the accountability of that. I don't know if we put some language in that basically says, you know, it's up to them to report whether or not they're exceeding. And if they report that they aren't, but they're audited and it finds out, I mean, we can put the language in that says if it fails, you don't qualify. If they receive funds, they report that it passed, and they receive those funds and they get audited and find out that they actually did have a vote that failed, they would have to repay that money, or they would basically falsely be receiving the ASTRA funds. If we could do that, the other point of our offer would be to
Mr. Chairman, I think you're on to something. We have concerns over the audit, and if we could borrow from some of the revenue neutral language, that it could be turned in to BODA or to the state treasurer's office by any resident or taxpayer in that district. They would be able to file to challenge whether it failed and passed. And that way it wouldn't be an audit.
no, and maybe I shouldn't have said audit, but if there's a process, just a complaint process or something that they can file to where the Secretary of State could, or not Secretary of State, the State Treasurer's Office could do some research and find the minutes and understand if they do qualify or not. I think that would clean that up. But the other part of our offer was to get, instead of 50%, go to 75% on the 100% if they're revenue neutral, 75% if they stay under the threshold, and then 0 if they attempt to exceed and it fails.
Let us visit about that, Mr. Chairman. Let us visit a minute. Thank you. So, Mr. Chairman, we may have something to look at, but I'm going to call on the Vice Chairman. I think he's got an idea, and I like it. I hope you guys can consider it.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. What I was throwing out would be the idea of if you stay at revenue neutral, you are 100% of ASTRA. And if you are at the max of the formula, well, we know what the formula is. I can't explain it. But it would be 50%, but if you're at somewhere between, and we would need to determine, I was thinking halfway between, you would be at 75. That complicates things. But ASTRA is 100%. We'll just use 4%. If you're at 2%, you get 75% of ASTRA. If you're at the 4% plus the new construction, you would be at 50%. So it would be 3 different levels potentially. Like I say, Mr. Chairman, it kind of complicates things, but the 25% carrot seems really small because they could go clear up to the 4% plus the growth. still get 75%. So they're only penalized 25%. So we were just discussing that, and the chair said, well, rather than try to explain it 2 or 3 times, just throw it out once and see. And I'll be glad to answer questions if that doesn't seem to flow, and we can try to discuss, come up with a formula or different numbers. But that was what I was saying.
Right, and we've had several instances in our tax policy where there's a cliff, and you go $1 over, and you go from 100% to nothing. So I appreciate the attempt to kind of stair step that up. I think that's a reasonable offer to move forward with this.
I know I'm getting a little bit too in the math and the weeds, but we could actually do a slope equation so that it, I know, he's cringing at me, but you know where I'm going with this. There would be no cliff then, but the threshold would be halfway. I mean, you can draw the slope as such, and that would be the percentage of the money that you receive. But you guys consider whatever, either one's fine with me.
Yeah, I did actually think about that because I remember talking about when we were doing the Social Security cliff and talking about that, we had kind of developed a formula at one point or several points along the line. I think that's a good idea to keep in the back of our mind for next year if we want to modify this, but just for simplicity right now tonight, I'd prefer to just stay with the 100, 75, and 50, just to make it a little bit simpler. If the staff have a question,
I think we would just want to clear that the 75 is if they do not exceed halfway between the revenue neutral rate amount and the threshold amount. Is that?
that's my understanding.
the
There would be a dollar amount at the kind of the 50% of the threshold, and if they were at that or below, it would be the 75. Is that the understanding or the intent? Okay. Okay. I think we have agreement on that. The only other outstanding item would be the 4/5. Is that where we want to land on that process?
Mr. Chairman, we like that number. I know several things have been talked about. 4/5 makes sense. I know it's a high threshold, but we're trying to protect property taxes and allow local governments to work here. So I think this is a good mix that allows that.
Yes, I think 4/5 is a good number that 4/5 or higher, obviously. So if you had a commission of 3, it would take 100% to get that, but just depending on the number of the board.
For staff's clarity's sake, 80 is just write it in as a vote of at least 80% of the board.
Yes. We can talk, we've got some statutes that talk in fractions, some that talk in decimals, some that talk in percentages. So whatever is easiest to draft as far as the staff is concerned for clarity.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think those were the main provisions and we're in agreement. So, Mr. Chairman, we are going to have to do an agree to disagree. And since it is a Senate bill, I think the agree to disagree would start in your chamber. If you guys could run that tonight and we could run it first thing in the morning.
Yes, I think we're on the floor now, so we can attempt to run that if, I don't know how long that would take to draft that and get it ready, but we could.
A few minutes. Okay, that would be great. And then we would run it first thing in the morning.
Okay.
And then we would have to meet again very quickly, but I don't think that will be any problem.
Okay.
I like the product. I like I like your effort that you put into this, and thank you.
We did have one final question. Mr. Siebers asked, do we want to make that a 80% requirement of the members present or the elected members of the body? If there was a situation where one of the members was not able to attend, if there was an emergency, do we need to clarify, is it 80% of those present or the total that are elected?
So, Mr. Chairman, I think we're going to make the body, because they could game it and have certain members not show up, knowing that they were no votes. I don't know. Do you have any suggestions on that?
If I was a no vote, I'd be making sure I made it to the meeting. I don't know that there's any secret meetings, but okay. Yeah, the total number of the totally elected members of the body is sufficient.
Okay, I think it would just make it simpler. Then they know how many votes they need.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any other clarification staff might need for?
Did it take effect this year?
I think that's what we had originally in 21-25.
Obviously, the effect of this year is up to you. I do think Adam indicates it might be good if it is this year to have it be in the register.
Oh, upon
Administration.
publication in the register, yeah. Would there be any complications of any of the pieces that would require 2026 implementation?
Not that I'm aware of, except for the $60 million fiscal note.
Right, and we do have the language making that appropriation. We had that in 21-25, so we could still have that in, so that money could be distributed. Yes, current year, if that's acceptable. Okay.
When you say current year, you mean current calendar year?
Yes.
This is state fiscal, it's a transfer in state fiscal year 2026, the same way that the previous version had been. Okay.
Yes, sorry, I talk calendar year sometimes instead of fiscal year, so. So do we want to change that to publication of the register, just to speed that up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That would be great.
Without thinking through all the implications, but we can probably confirm this tomorrow morning, but probably at this point, probably register is not a bad idea, just to make sure we don't miss something.
Just to speed it up, okay.
And our question, I guess, is to Adam on the agree to disagree. Should we just wait here for you so that we can get that signed this evening, so that you guys can run it this evening?
Need to make sure the Senate members don't disappear. I believe the House is probably going to be voting soon, so I could probably, just as long as I can have access to find you all, I could probably find them on the floor. That's probably be my suggestion.
Okay, yeah, that'd be fine. Right. All right, I think that covers it, so